My boyfriend of 3 years has been sleeping with my best friend in my bed, and I found out because the idiot forgot to delete the photos off my laptop. My name is Kayla Robinson, I'm 32, and until last Tuesday evening I believed loyalty was a real thing that mattered between people who claim to love each other. Turns out I was about as naive as the brides who think their wedding day will be perfect just because they spent $50,000 making it look that way. I work alongside my mother in our family's wedding planning business, Exclusive Moments. We've been creating dream weddings for other people for 5 years now, ever since my father died suddenly, and I dropped out of my interior design program to keep the business running. Mom's 54 and has poured everything into this company since she and Dad started it 22 years ago. And my boyfriend, Justin, 33, marketing executive, owner of the most convincing smile in 3 counties, has been our secret weapon for expanding our client base. He charms every vendor, remembers every detail, and makes our couples feel like their wedding is the most important event in human history. He's also been casually mentioning marriage for over a year now, but lately his hints have gotten so urgent you'd think someone was holding a gun to his head. Just last month he asked to hold my grandmother's ring for sizing purposes, because apparently measuring my finger with a piece of string like a normal person would be too simple. My best friend Chloe is 32, same as me, and we've been inseparable since we were kids scraping our knees on the same playground. She's a photographer now, successful enough to work most of our weddings, and I've always thought of her as the sister I actually wanted instead of the brother I got stuck with. Jacob's 28 and lives across the country, which works perfectly for everyone involved, since he only calls when he needs money anyway. So there I was last Tuesday, sitting in my home office organizing client contracts like the responsible adult I've trained myself to be. Chloe had borrowed my laptop the week before for editing. She's always running out of storage space on her own equipment, and she'd returned it Monday night with apologies about keeping it so long. Just needed to check if she'd uploaded those wedding photos to our shared cloud folder like she'd promised. When I opened the laptop, the recent files folder showed thumbnail images that definitely weren't from any wedding I'd ever planned, unless our clients had started requesting very different kinds of photography packages. Clicking to investigate was probably the stupidest thing I've ever done, but curiosity has always been my fatal flaw. What I found were 37 explicit photos of Justin and Chloe together. Not just together in my bedroom. My grandmother's quilt was clearly visible in half the shots. The lamp I bought myself for Christmas last year. Even the book on my nightstand that I'd been reading before my last business trip. The metadata showed they were taken 3 months ago while I was in Portland, helping my cousin plan her destination wedding. Of course, Justin had access. After 3 years together, he has keys to my place and stays over whenever I travel for work. Because I trusted him. Because I'm apparently the kind of person who gives spare keys to someone who sees my absence as an opportunity. I screenshotted every single photo before closing the laptop. Then I sat in the dark for 3 hours, my phone heavy in my hands, watching my perfect life dissolve into pixels and timestamps. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was how stupidly obvious everything became once I knew what to look for. Justin's guilt was written all over his face in neon letters, but I'd been too busy planning other people's happily ever afters to notice my own was built on lies. The extra attention, the expensive gifts for no reason, the way he watched my face whenever I checked my phone. Classic overcompensation from someone who knows he's been caught but doesn't know that he's been caught yet. When he texted asking about dinner plans that night, I responded normally. Sounds great. Can't wait to see you. Because I wasn't ready to confront what I'd discovered. Not yet. I needed time to think, time to plan, time to figure out exactly how I wanted to burn this whole thing down. The message seemed innocent enough, though I knew I'd never read his words the same way again. Every "I love you" and "miss you" would now carry the weight of knowing exactly what he'd been doing while claiming to miss me. Over the following 6 weeks, I became adept at concealing my discovery while planning my response. And let me tell you, maintaining normal routines when you know your entire life is a lie requires the kind of acting skills they don't teach in drama class. I showed up to family dinners and client meetings with my usual smile, laughed at Justin's jokes, let him hold me while we watched movies on the same couch where he'd betrayed me. Though I sat more rigidly than before, my body betraying my emotional turmoil despite my mental resolve. Each performance became easier with practice, which probably says something disturbing about my character that I'm not ready to examine. The hardest part was dealing with casual intimacy, pulling away from kisses just slightly too quickly, stiffening when he held me, finding excuses to be too tired or too busy. I covered it as stress from busy wedding season, and Justin bought it completely because guilt makes people gullible. They want to believe your distance is about work pressure instead of the fact that you know they're lying, cheating pieces of shit. I even started encouraging him when he mentioned wanting to take our relationship to the next level. I think about our future together all the time, I'd say with carefully practiced enthusiasm. I can't wait to see where this goes. The words tasted like poison, but watching his face light up with relief made every lie worth it. Because here's what I learned about guilt. It makes people desperate to fix things they can't actually fix. Justin's conscience was eating him alive, and his solution wasn't to confess or end the affair. His solution was to lock me down with a ring before I could discover what he'd done. Chloe, meanwhile, had been overly attentive lately, constantly offering to help with wedding planning projects she'd never shown interest in before. "I just want to make sure you're not overwhelmed," she'd say, bringing me expensive coffee and offering to work extra hours for free. Her messages had gotten longer and more effusive than usual, as if she could prove her loyalty through sheer volume of words. The guilt was killing both of them, but not enough to make them actually stop. I knew this because they thought they were being subtle about their continued contact. Justin's phone habits had changed. More bathroom breaks during dinner, stepping outside to take work calls, holding his screen at angles where I couldn't see it. And Chloe had started mentioning Justin in conversation more often, casual references that felt rehearsed. "Justin's such a great guy," she'd say out of nowhere. "You're so lucky to have someone who understands the business." Or, "Justin was saying the funniest thing about vendor management the other day." When exactly were they having conversations about vendor management? But I just smiled and agreed, because watching guilty people dig their own graves is surprisingly entertaining. By the time Justin's guilt manifested as an urgent need to secure our relationship, I was ready to let him propose. In fact, I was counting on it, because nothing says, "I'm a lying, cheating bastard," quite like proposing marriage to cover up an affair, and nothing says, "I'm ready for revenge," quite like saying yes to a proposal you know is built on desperation rather than love. The ring he'd been holding for sizing was burning a hole in his pocket, and his hints had become so obvious that even our vendors were starting to ask when he was going to pop the question. "Soon," he'd tell them with that charming smile. Very soon. He had no idea how right he was. 3 days later, Justin texted asking if I wanted to go to Marcello's for dinner. "Our usual spot," he said. "Nothing special. Just felt like some good pasta and wine." Right. Nothing special. Except he'd made reservations for 7:30 on a Thursday night at the same restaurant where we'd had our first date 3 years ago, because apparently subtlety died along with my trust in him. I spent an hour getting ready, choosing the blue dress he'd complimented before and my grandmother's earrings. If this was going to be a performance, I might as well look the part. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was putting on makeup to watch him put on an act. When I walked into Marcello's, Justin was already there, fidgeting with his tie like it was personally offending him. He'd requested our old table by the window, the one where he'd spilled marinara sauce on his shirt, trying to impress me on date number 1. The same bottle of wine we'd shared during our anniversary trip to Napa sat chilling in an ice bucket. "You look beautiful," he said, standing to pull out my chair with the kind of exaggerated chivalry that screamed desperation. "Thank you." I smiled and settled into my seat, watching him tug at his collar again. "You seem nervous. Everything okay?" "Perfect," he said quickly. Too quickly. Everything's perfect. The waiter brought us menus we didn't need and filled our glasses with wine that cost more than my monthly phone bill. Justin barely touched his food, cutting his chicken into smaller and smaller pieces while launching into stories about our relationship that felt suspiciously like a greatest hits album. "Remember when we got caught in that rainstorm during the Henderson wedding?" he asked, his fork hovering over untouched pasta. "You were so worried about your hair, but I thought you looked perfect." I remember. I also remembered that Chloe had been there too, taking photos under the pavilion while I ran around in the rain trying to salvage centerpieces. But apparently that detail didn't make it into Justin's romantic revision of history. He kept glancing toward his jacket hanging on the back of his chair like it contained live explosives, which, in a way, it did. My grandmother's ring was probably burning a hole in his pocket, along with whatever remained of his guilty conscience. "Kayla," he said suddenly, setting down his fork with the kind of deliberate precision people use when they're about to do something monumentally stupid. "These past 3 years have been the best of my life. Here we go. You're my best friend, my partner in everything." He reached for his jacket, his hands actually trembling. "I can't imagine my future without you in it." The entire restaurant seemed to slow down as he stood up and moved around to my side of the table. Conversations at nearby tables grew quieter, and I could feel eyes turning toward us like we were dinner theater, which honestly, we kind of were. Justin dropped to one knee next. To my chair, pulling out the ring box with my grandmother's diamond winking under the candlelight. The same ring I'd inherited when I was 25 and always imagined passing down to my own daughter someday. Now it was being used as a prop in the most pathetic marriage proposal in restaurant history. Kayla, you're my best friend, my partner, my everything. Will you marry me? The words hung in the air while every person in Marcello's held their breath, waiting for my answer. Justin's face was a mask of hope and terror, probably wondering if I could somehow see straight through to his guilty soul, which of course I could. I looked at the ring, then at his face, then at all the strangers watching our supposedly perfect moment, and I realized that saying no would end this whole beautiful disaster before I'd finished orchestrating it. Yes, I said, letting him slide the ring onto my finger like a very expensive shackle. Of course, yes. The restaurant erupted in applause from people who thought they'd just witnessed true love instead of the most calculated proposal in human history. Justin's relief was so obvious it was almost embarrassing. He kissed me while I mentally calculated exactly how much this lie was going to cost both of us. I love you so much, he whispered against my lips, and for a second I almost felt bad about what was coming. Almost. 2 days later, we were at Coffee Corner celebrating our engagement over overpriced lattes and artisanal pastries. Justin kept checking his phone between bites of his croissant, probably texting Chloe about how smoothly everything had gone. I was scrolling through wedding venues on my tablet, playing the part of the excited bride-to-be. Look at this place, I said, turning the screen toward him. They have a garden ceremony option. Beautiful, he said without actually looking, his attention divided between his phone and the door. Whatever makes you happy. That's when Chloe burst through the entrance like she was being chased by paparazzi, carrying an enormous bouquet of white roses and what looked suspiciously like tears in her eyes. Oh my God! She practically shrieked, rushing over to our table. I'm so happy for you both. She threw her arms around me with the kind of desperate intensity people usually reserve for airport reunions, her hands trembling slightly as they lingered on my shoulders. The bouquet was beautiful and expensive, probably cost her $200 at least. Nothing says, I'm not consumed by guilt quite like dropping a car payment on congratulatory flowers. You deserve every happiness in the world, she said, her voice pitched just a little too high, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I'm so, so happy for you. She hugged Justin next, but it was brief and awkward, like they were distant acquaintances instead of secret lovers. The performance was almost impressive in its obvious falseness. This is so exciting, Chloe continued, settling into the chair across from us with manic energy. When's the date? What kind of dress are you thinking? I have so many ideas for photos. For the next hour, she bombarded us with wedding planning suggestions that grew increasingly elaborate. Destination bachelor and bachelorette parties. A 12-piece band for the reception. Ice sculptures shaped like swans. Her enthusiasm felt desperate, frantic, like she was trying to prove something through sheer volume of wedding-related excitement. We should do an engagement party, she said, pulling out her phone to take notes. Something intimate but elegant. I know the perfect venue, and I could handle all the photography for free. It would be my gift to you. That's incredibly generous, I said, watching her fingers shake slightly as she typed. But you don't have to. I want to, she interrupted. I want everything to be perfect for you both. You deserve perfect. Justin nodded along, playing the role of supportive fiancé while stealing glances at his phone. The whole scene felt like community theater performed by people who'd never actually read the script. Finally, after an hour of increasingly animated planning suggestions, Chloe took my hands across the table. Her grip was tight, almost desperate, and her palms were slightly damp with nervous perspiration. I have to ask you something important, she said, her voice rushing like she'd been rehearsing this moment for days. I know we've been best friends forever, and this means everything to me. Here it comes. Would you consider letting me be your maid of honor? The request tumbled out in a single breath, her voice higher than normal and edged with the kind of desperation that made my skin crawl. She was staring at me like her entire self-worth depended on my answer, which maybe it did. Nothing quite like betraying your best friend to make you crave the highest honor at her wedding. Classic overcompensation. The guilt was practically radiating off her in waves. Of course, I said, squeezing her hands warmly while calculating exactly how much more satisfying this was going to make everything. I can't imagine anyone else standing beside me. The tears in Chloe's eyes looked genuinely relieved, like I just granted her absolution instead of handing her the front row seat to her own destruction. She squeezed my hands tighter, her gratitude so overwhelming you'd think I just saved her life, instead of agreeing to let her stand beside me while I burned it all down. Thank you, she whispered, and for a second I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then Justin's phone buzzed on the table between us, and I watched both of them glance at it with the kind of synchronized awareness that only comes from shared secrets. The screen lit up with a text preview that he quickly turned face down, but not before Chloe's eyes flicked to it and back to mine with practiced casualness. "So," I said, settling back in my chair with renewed focus, "I guess we should start planning this wedding." And plan we did. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into wedding preparations with the kind of enthusiasm that would make Martha Stewart weep with pride. Mom was thrilled to see me so engaged with the process, especially since most of our brides either micromanaged every detail or completely checked out, leaving us to handle everything while they stressed about guest lists and family drama. "It's wonderful seeing you take such ownership of your special day," Mom said during our third venue walkthrough in 2 days. We were standing in the garden at Ashford Manor discussing ceremony layouts while I mentally calculated sightlines for projector screens. Some brides get so overwhelmed they forget to enjoy the planning process. I nodded and smiled, jotting down notes about the Manor's audiovisual capabilities. They had a state-of-the-art projection system and professional-grade speakers throughout the reception hall. Perfect for multimedia presentations. "I want everything to be memorable," I told her, which was probably the most honest thing I'd said in weeks. The irony wasn't lost on me that my years helping other couples plan their perfect days had given me exactly the skills I needed to orchestrate the perfect disaster. Every detail that goes into creating a flawless wedding, every backup plan and contingency protocol, every piece of professional equipment we used to capture and display precious memories, all of it was about to serve a very different purpose. My favorite planning sessions happened after midnight, when the office was dark and I could work without interruption. Exclusive Moments had invested in top-tier equipment over the years, professional editing software, and high-resolution displays that our clients paid premium prices to access. Now I was using that same technology to craft something no wedding guest had ever seen before. I titled the presentation Our Love Story, because apparently even my revenge had to be ironically on brand. The opening sequence was legitimately beautiful, starting with childhood photos Mom had helped me scan, then college memories, early dating pictures that actually made me nostalgic for the person I used to be. Someone who believed in loyalty and trust, and the basic human decency not to fuck your best friend in someone else's bed. The progression felt natural, romantic even. Family gatherings where all three of us smiled together, completely oblivious to how this story would actually end. Business events where Justin charmed our clients, while Chloe captured the perfect moments, both of them playing supporting roles in my supposedly perfect life. Any wedding guest watching would see exactly what they expected, a love story building toward its inevitable happy ending. But then came the part I was really proud of. The photos from my laptop required careful editing to ensure maximum impact. I cropped them for clarity, enhanced the lighting to make faces unmistakable, and created a careful sequence that would leave absolutely no room for interpretation or denial. Because if you're going to destroy 2 lives simultaneously, you might as well do it professionally. I created a separate folder labeled a surprise ending and practiced the timing obsessively, making sure the transition from sweet memories to explicit betrayal would hit at exactly the right moment. During dinner service, when everyone was relaxed and comfortable, when the wine had been flowing long enough to lower inhibitions, but not so long that people were too drunk to process what they were seeing. Mom walked by my office during one of these late-night sessions, probably coming back to grab files she'd forgotten. "You're working so late on that slideshow," she said, peeking over my shoulder at the innocent photos currently displayed on my screen. "It's beautiful seeing you put so much care into preserving your memories." "Thanks," I said, minimizing the window before she could see the folder structure I'd organized. "I want to make sure it's perfect." She smiled and patted my shoulder, completely unaware that she was encouraging me to perfect the presentation that would likely destroy everything she'd spent decades building. That's my girl. Details matter. Details definitely mattered. Like the timestamp overlays I was adding to each incriminating photo, making it impossible for anyone to claim they were old or taken out of context. Like the GPS coordinates embedded in the metadata, proving exactly where and when each image was captured. Like the way I was building multiple backup files to ensure the presentation couldn't be stopped once it started running. While I worked, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from Chloe. Her texting habits had become increasingly frantic since I'd agreed to let her be Maid of Honor, like she was trying to prove her enthusiasm through sheer volume of words. "OMG, I found the perfect hair accessories for your look. I'm thinking something vintage to match your grandmother's ring. I saw these pearl combs that would be stunning with your dress." Heart emoji response from me. Back to editing photos of her betrayal. "Had another idea for the bachelorette party. What about a wine tasting tour? I know this amazing vineyard that does private groups and the photos would be incredible. We could do a whole vintage glamour theme." Heart emoji response. Another timestamp adjusted for maximum clarity. I've been working on my Maid of Honor speech and I keep crying happy tears. I have so many beautiful stories to share about your relationship and how perfect you and Justin are together. True love is so rare, and you two have something really special. This one made me laugh out loud in my dark office. Heart emoji response while I cropped a particularly damning image that left no doubt about exactly how special their relationship was. The messages kept coming, each one longer and more effusive than the last. Chloe was overcompensating so hard, she was practically levitating with fake enthusiasm. Every text read like a desperate attempt to convince herself as much as me that she was excited about celebrating my marriage to the man she was secretly fucking. I can't wait to tell everyone how perfect you and Justin are together, she wrote one Thursday night while I was adjusting color saturation on a photo taken in my bedroom. I have so many beautiful stories to share about your relationship. Beautiful stories. Right. I bet she did. The worst part wasn't even her obvious guilt. It was how transparent her overcompensation had become. Before I knew about the affair, Chloe's texts were casual, normal friend communication. Now they read like marketing copy, written by someone who'd never experienced genuine emotion. Every message stuffed with exclamation points and heart emojis, every interaction performed with the kind of manic energy that screamed, "Please don't look too closely at my actual feelings." But I kept responding with heart emojis and enthusiastic agreement, because maintaining the performance was crucial to the plan. Let her think her desperate enthusiasm was working. Let her believe she was successfully covering her tracks with sheer volume of wedding-related excitement. Meanwhile, I was building something she had no idea was coming. The family business angle made everything more complicated. Every night I spent in that office using equipment Mom had invested her life savings in, knowing I was preparing to destroy the reputation she'd spent 22 years building. Exclusive Moments wasn't just our livelihood, it was her legacy. The dream she and Dad had built from nothing, the company that had supported our family through my teenage years in college, the professional relationships that had taken decades to develop. And I was about to blow it all up for the sake of my dignity. Some nights, sitting in that dark office with incriminating photos glowing on the screen, I almost talked myself out of the whole thing. I'd think about the vendor relationships Mom had cultivated, the clients who trusted us with their most important day, the referral network that kept us booked solid 9 months in advance. One slideshow was going to destroy all of that. Word would spread through the industry faster than wildfire, and no amount of professional competence could overcome the reputation of being the wedding planning company where the owner's daughter used a client presentation to publicly humiliate her cheating fiancé. But then I'd remember the timestamp on those photos. 3 months while I was in Portland helping my cousin plan her wedding, being the kind of family member who shows up when people need support. And Justin had used my absence as an opportunity to bring another woman into my bed, into my space, into the life I'd been building while believing I was part of something real. Some betrayals demand consequences that transcend business considerations. Some violations of trust require a response that prioritizes dignity over profit margins, personal justice over professional reputation. And some people need to learn that actions have consequences, even if those consequences destroy everything else in the process. I'd built a career out of creating perfect moments for other people. Now I was going to use those same skills to create the most perfectly imperfect moment of my own life. The emotional toll was getting heavier every day, sitting through venue tastings while mentally calculating projector placement, discussing floral arrangements while practicing slideshow transitions, smiling at Mom's excitement about my wedding while knowing I was preparing to embarrass our family in front of 150 guests, including our most important clients and professional contacts. But every time the guilt threatened to overwhelm me, I'd get another text from Chloe about how blessed she felt to be my maid of honor. Or I'd watch Justin check his phone during dinner with that careful casualness that meant he was hiding something. The performance they were both maintaining made my own deception feel almost reasonable by comparison. At least I was planning to end the charade. They seemed perfectly content to keep lying indefinitely. The really sick part was how good I was getting at the whole thing. 6 weeks of practice had turned me into a convincing actress, capable of discussing wedding favors and seating charts with genuine-seeming enthusiasm, while simultaneously planning the most spectacular public humiliation our industry had ever witnessed. I was discovering talents I never knew I possessed, skills that probably said disturbing things about my character that I wasn't ready to examine. Like how easily I could compartmentalize emotion when I had a project to complete, how efficiently I could organize evidence for maximum impact, how naturally deception came to me when I had sufficient motivation. Maybe this was who I'd always been underneath the loyal daughter and faithful girlfriend routine. Maybe it just took the right betrayal to bring out my true nature. The emotional toll was becoming harder to ignore with each passing day, but so was my determination to see this through. Because some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, and some people need to learn that their actions have consequences, even if those consequences destroy everything else in the process. In the final weeks leading up to the wedding, I became obsessed with backup plans. And backup plans for the backup plans. Because apparently my trust issues extended beyond relationships and into data management. I made 7 copies of the slideshow across different USB drives, each one labeled innocuously as Wedding Memories Final Version. Then I created cloud backups on 3 separate accounts, because nothing says paranoid, bride, quite like triple redundant revenge storage. But honestly, after discovering your entire life is built on lies, a little paranoia feels pretty reasonable. The presentation equipment testing happened during our regular venue walkthrough at Ashford Manor. Mom thought I was being thorough about audiovisual setup, which technically I was, just not for the reasons she assumed. The projection system here is top tier, the coordinator explained, walking me through the controls. We can queue multiple presentations, auto-advance between slides, and the backup system ensures nothing gets interrupted during your special moment. Perfect. Nothing quite like professional-grade reliability when you're planning to destroy 2 lives simultaneously. What if someone tries to stop the presentation midstream? I asked, because apparently my brain had shifted into full tactical mode. Well, the system's designed to prevent accidental interruptions, he said with a laugh. Once it starts running from the queue, you'd have to manually override each file. Takes a few minutes if someone's not familiar with the system. Even more perfect, I spent 20 minutes pretending to care about optimal screen positioning while secretly memorizing every button and cable. The coordinator probably thought I was the most detail-oriented bride he'd ever worked with. If only he knew I was actually conducting reconnaissance for psychological warfare. Mom watched the whole thing with obvious pride. "Look at you taking charge of every detail," she said on our drive back to the office. "Your father would be so proud seeing you handle your wedding with such professionalism." The guilt hit me like a truck. Dad had built this business on integrity and trust, 2 concepts that were about to become casualties of my personal vendetta. But then I remembered Justin's face during our engagement dinner, all relief and fake sincerity, and the guilt transformed back into cold determination. Some people don't deserve the benefit of professional courtesy. A week before the wedding, Chloe burst into the bridal boutique for my final fitting, like she was auditioning for a role in a romantic comedy. Her arms were full of hair accessories, backup makeup, and what looked suspiciously like a speech draft covered in tear-stained rewrites. "Oh my God, you look incredible," she gushed as I stood on the platform in my grandmother's dress. The seamstress had altered it perfectly, maintaining the vintage elegance while ensuring it fit like it was made for me. Which in a way it was. 3 generations of women in my family had worn this dress for their supposedly happiest days. "I've been practicing my Maid of Honor speech," Chloe announced, her voice catching slightly as she pulled out her notes. "It's all about loyalty, trust, and the unbreakable bonds between people who truly love each other." The irony was so thick I could practically taste it. Here she was, rehearsing a speech about loyalty while having been secretly fucking my fiancé for months. The audacity was almost impressive. "Let me read you just a little part," she continued, unfolding her pages with trembling hands. "I want to make sure it's perfect." She cleared her throat and began reading in that overly emotional voice people use when they're trying to convince themselves as much as their audience. "Kayla and Justin represent everything beautiful about real love. They've built their relationship on absolute trust, complete honesty, and unwavering loyalty to each other." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. The seamstress kept pinning my hem, completely oblivious to the fact that she was witnessing the most unintentionally hilarious performance in Maid of Honor history. "Their bond is unbreakable," Chloe continued, her voice getting more strained with each word. "You can see it in how they look at each other, how they support each other's dreams, how they never let anything come between them." She paused, seeming to tear up, and for a moment her composure wavered completely, like she was finally processing the magnitude of what she'd done. "You and him are proof that real love exists." The seamstress looked up with genuine emotion. "That's beautiful, dear. True love stories like theirs are so rare." I nodded and smiled, my face hurting from the effort of maintaining this performance. "I can't wait for everyone to hear that speech, Chloe. It's going to be so meaningful." And it was going to be meaningful, just not in the way she intended. Picture this: a woman standing at a podium delivering heartfelt remarks about trust and loyalty while explicit photos of her betrayal cycle on the screen behind her. The contrast was going to be absolutely perfect. "I'm so honored you chose me for this," Chloe whispered, grabbing my hands with that desperate intensity she'd developed lately. "Being your maid of honor means everything to me." "I couldn't imagine anyone else standing beside me," I said truthfully. Because honestly, having her right there in the front row when everything exploded was going to make the whole thing infinitely more satisfying. The bachelor and bachelorette parties had happened the previous weekend. Separate events because Chloe had insisted on planning them herself. Apparently, she needed to control every aspect of the pre-wedding festivities, which made sense given her obvious guilt-driven need to prove her devotion to our friendship. My bachelorette party was a wine-tasting tour through Napa, complete with a hired photographer to capture all our precious memories. 12 women sipping overpriced wine while I pretended to be excited about my upcoming marriage to a lying, cheating piece of shit. The photographer kept encouraging us to pose with signs that said things like "Bride's last night out" and "Team Bride forever." Forever. Right. Chloe had arranged for matching t-shirts with Kayla's crew, printed in glittery letters because apparently nothing says best friend forever, quite like custom apparel purchased with money earned photographing the weddings of couples who actually trust each other. "I wanted everything to be perfect for you," she kept saying, adjusting my tiara and making sure I was always in the center of every photo. "You deserve the perfect send-off into married life." My phone buzzed constantly with updates from Justin's bachelor party. Photos from various bars around downtown, group shots of him and his groomsmen looking appropriately rowdy but not too drunk. He was playing the part of the excited groom perfectly, sending me texts about how much he missed me and couldn't wait for our wedding day. "Thinking about you," read one message, sent from what looked like their third bar of the night. "Can't wait to marry my best friend." I responded with heart emojis while mentally calculating whether he'd sent similar messages to Chloe. Probably. Guilt makes people generous with their fake affection. The most surreal part was how normal everything felt when you removed the context of massive betrayal. Just a group of women celebrating friendship and new beginnings, making toasts about love and loyalty, while I smiled and nodded and counted down the hours until I could stop pretending. "To Kayla," Chloe said during our final toast of the night, raising her glass with tears in her eyes. "The most loyal, trustworthy, beautiful friend anyone could ask for. You deserve every happiness in the world." Everyone cheered and clinked glasses while I wondered if she actually believed her own bullshit or if the guilt was finally driving her completely insane. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my childhood bedroom, my grandmother's ring reflecting moonlight across the ceiling. The same room where I'd planned imaginary weddings as a little girl, back when I thought love was simple and people meant what they said, and happily ever after was just a matter of finding the right person. My laptop was open on the bed beside me, showing the final slideshow one more time. I'd watched it so many times over the past few weeks that I could probably recite the timestamp on every photo. The progression was flawless, moving from sweet childhood memories through our dating years and into the recent months when everything looked perfect from the outside. And then came the ending I'd crafted so carefully. 3 years of relationship memories culminating in irrefutable evidence of betrayal. 37 photos that told a very different story about trust and loyalty and unbreakable bonds. Tomorrow, 150 guests would witness the same progression. Family friends, business clients, wedding vendors who'd worked with us for years. People who trusted our family's reputation for creating perfect moments and professional excellence. The thought of their faces, their shock, their inevitable gossip made my stomach twist with something that wasn't quite regret, but wasn't satisfaction either. More like the weight of knowing there was no going back once this started. I'd briefly considered the potential damage to Exclusive Moments' reputation. Word would spread through the industry faster than wildfire. The wedding planning company where the owner's daughter used client equipment to publicly humiliate her cheating fiancé. Some couples would find it justifiable, even admirable. Others would see it as unprofessional drama that had no place at such an important event. Either way, it was going to cost us business. Probably a lot of business, but some betrayals demand consequences regardless of business implications. Some violations of trust require a response that prioritizes dignity over profit margins, personal justice over professional reputation. And some people need to learn that their actions have consequences, even if those consequences destroy everything else in the process. Mom knocked softly on my door, entering with a steaming mug of chamomile tea and the kind of gentle concern she'd perfected during my teenage years. "Can't sleep?" she asked, settling onto the edge of my bed like she used to when I was small and afraid of thunderstorms. "Just thinking," I said, closing the laptop carefully. "You know how it is the night before a big event." She smiled and handed me the tea, her eyes soft with maternal pride. "I remember the night before my wedding to your father. I was so nervous I reorganized my entire closet twice and alphabetized my books." "Any regrets?" I asked, though I wasn't sure why. "About the closet organization?" "Absolutely. It was completely unnecessary stress." "About getting married?" Her expression grew more serious, that look she got when she was choosing her words carefully. Marriage is complicated, sweetheart. People change, life throws unexpected challenges at you, and sometimes you discover things about your partner that surprise you. She paused, seeming to consider something. But if you're marrying someone you truly trust, someone who respects you enough to be honest even when it's difficult, then you can weather almost anything together. The irony was so perfect it was almost painful. Here she was, giving me advice about trust and honesty on the night before I was planning to expose the most dishonest, disrespectful relationship of my life. "Are you ready for tomorrow, sweetheart?" she asked, studying my face with that motherly intuition that always made me nervous. I met her eyes directly, feeling the weight of everything I'd planned, everything I was about to unleash, everything that would change forever once the slideshow started playing. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I answered truthfully. Mom squeezed my hand one more time before heading back to her room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my laptop full of nuclear material. Sleep was obviously not happening tonight, so I spent the remaining hours until dawn making final preparations and running through contingency plans like I was organizing the invasion of Normandy, which honestly wasn't that far off. The morning of my wedding dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect weather that makes photographers weep with joy and brides feel like the universe is blessing their union. Too bad the universe had no idea what it was actually blessing today. I arrived at Ashford Manor at 7 a.m. for setup, my bag containing everything I needed for the most memorable wedding presentation in venue history. The coordinator, David, had worked with our family for 6 years and greeted me with the kind of warm professionalism that came from years of successful events. "Big day," he said, unlocking the bridal suite. "Your mom's already here directing vendor setup. That woman never stops, does she?" "Never," I agreed, following him through the venue while mentally cataloging every detail I'd memorized during our walkthrough. The projection system, the backup controls, the exact timing of dinner service. I brought the final slideshow file. Just want to make sure our family presentation is ready. "Of course. Let's get that loaded now, so there's no stress later." David led me to the audiovisual booth, chattering about weather and timeline, while I pulled out the USB drive containing my masterpiece. Multiple copies, multiple formats, all designed to ensure nothing could stop the show once it started. "Just making sure our family presentation is ready," I said casually, handing him the drive. "You know how important these memory presentations are to families." "Absolutely. Your mother's events are always so thoughtfully planned." He loaded the files without question, because why would he question anything? We were the Robinsons from Exclusive Moments, and we'd never given him any reason to doubt our professionalism. The irony was delicious. "Perfect," I said, watching him queue up the files in the automatic system. "And the backup protocol we discussed? All set. Multiple files loaded in sequence, just like your mother requested for the anniversary video last month. If anything gets interrupted, the system automatically advances to the next presentation. Even more perfect." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of organized chaos. Hair and makeup in the bridal suite while vendors transformed the venue into something worthy of a magazine spread. Mom flitted between locations with her usual military precision, ensuring every detail met Exclusive Moments' standards. Chloe arrived with her camera equipment and enough nervous energy to power the entire sound system. "You look so beautiful," she kept saying, adjusting my grandmother's dress and fluffing my hair with the kind of manic attention that screamed guilty conscience. "This is going to be the most perfect day." Perfect, right. Her version of perfect and my version were about to diverge in spectacular fashion. "I'm so honored to be standing beside you," she continued, her voice catching with emotion that seemed genuine until you remembered she'd been fucking my fiancé for months. "This means everything to me." I couldn't imagine anyone else in that position, I said truthfully, because honestly, having her front and center for the fireworks was going to make everything infinitely more satisfying. The ceremony itself went flawlessly, exactly as scripted. I walked down the aisle in my grandmother's dress, the same one she'd worn to marry a man who actually loved her, while a photographer Chloe had professionally recommended captured every moment of our performance. The guests smiled and dabbed at their eyes, completely oblivious to the fact that they were witnessing the most elaborate revenge plot disguised as a wedding in venue history. Justin stood at the altar looking appropriately moved, his eyes filling with tears as I approached. Guilt tears, most likely, but they photographed beautifully. The irony of him crying at our wedding while having betrayed every principle he was about to promise wasn't lost on me. "Do you, Justin, take Kayla to be your wife, promising to be faithful, committed, and honest in all things?" "I do," he said, his voice strong and clear. The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. "Do you, Kayla, take Justin to be your husband, promising to love, honor, and trust him through all of life's challenges? I do, I replied, meeting his eyes directly. Trust him? That ship had sailed, crashed into an iceberg, and sunk with all hands. But the performance required my participation. We exchanged rings and vows about faithfulness, commitment, and trust, while I mentally calculated how many hours until dinner service. The photographer captured every moment, every fake smile, every fraudulent promise that would look beautiful in our album and horrifying in hindsight. You may kiss the bride. Justin's lips touched mine while 150 guests applauded what they thought was the beginning of our happily ever after. Really, they were celebrating the end of the most dishonest relationship any of them would probably ever witness. The receiving line took 45 minutes of congratulations and well wishes from people who genuinely believed they'd witnessed true love. Vendors we'd worked with for years, family friends who'd watched me grow up, business clients who trusted our professional judgment, all of them offering heartfelt wishes for our future happiness. If only they knew what kind of future I'd actually planned. The cocktail hour gave everyone time to settle into reception mode while I made final mental preparations. Mom worked the room with her usual grace, ensuring every guest felt welcomed and every detail ran smoothly. She'd spent 22 years building this reputation, and I was about to use it to deliver the most devastating presentation of anyone's career. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for dinner. The reception hall looked stunning, each table perfectly appointed with flowers and candles, the head table positioned for optimal viewing of the projection screen. David had tested the sound system twice, ensuring every guest would hear the slideshow announcement clearly. Professional excellence in service of personal destruction. Dinner began with traditional toasts that felt like elaborate theatrical performances. Justin's mother stood first, her voice warm with the kind of maternal pride that would be mortifying to remember later. When Justin first told me about Kayla, I knew she was special, she said, raising her champagne glass toward our table. She's intelligent, beautiful, and comes from a family that understands the value of commitment and integrity. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect daughter-in-law. Commitment and integrity. The words hung in the air like a bad joke that nobody else understood yet. Mom's toast came next, sharing memories of my childhood dreams about marriage that felt like artifacts from someone else's life. The little girl who'd planned imaginary weddings in her bedroom had no idea that real marriage could involve this level of betrayal and calculated revenge. Kayla has always been my dreamer, Mom said, her voice thick with emotion. She used to plan elaborate ceremonies for her dolls, complete with flower arrangements and reception menus. Seeing her standing here today, so radiant and happy, reminds me that some dreams really do come true. Some dreams come true, others turn into nightmares. But Mom didn't know that yet. Then came Chloe's Maid of Honor speech, the performance I'd been anticipating for weeks. She stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded her notes, and I had to admire her commitment to the role. I've been Kayla's best friend for 15 years, she began, her voice carrying across the reception hall with practiced clarity. I've watched her through heartbreaks and triumphs, career changes, and family challenges, but I've never seen her as happy as she's been with Justin. The irony was so thick you could serve it with dinner. Here she was, praising my happiness with a man she'd been secretly screwing while I was working overtime to build our future. Their relationship is built on absolute trust, she continued, warming to her theme like she actually believed the words coming out of her mouth. You can see it in how they look at each other, how they support each other's dreams, how they never let anything come between them. Never let anything come between them. Except, her. Kayla and Justin represent everything beautiful about real love. They've built their relationship on complete honesty, unwavering loyalty, and the kind of unshakable friendship that survives any challenge. The applause was enthusiastic, guests nodding along with her description of our supposedly perfect relationship. If only they knew that the woman delivering this touching tribute had been providing challenges to our relationship in my own bedroom. To Kayla and Justin, Chloe concluded, raising her glass with tears in her eyes that looked almost genuine. May your love story continue to inspire everyone who knows you. Love story. Right. More like a cautionary tale about trusting the wrong people, but we get to that part soon enough. Dinner service proceeded with the kind of seamless professionalism that justified our reputation. Each course perfectly timed, wine glasses never empty, conversations flowing across tables filled with people who genuinely believed they were celebrating something beautiful. The staff moved efficiently between tables, clearing plates and refilling glasses, while David prepared the audiovisual presentation that would transform this elegant dinner into the most memorable train wreck any of these people would ever witness. Ladies and gentlemen, David announced as the dessert course concluded, his voice carrying easily across the reception hall through the sound system he tested obsessively. Please enjoy this celebration of Kayla and Justin's beautiful love story. The lights dimmed slightly, and the projection screen illuminated with the title slide I designed weeks ago. Our love story appeared in elegant script across a background of roses, looking exactly like every other wedding slideshow these guests had seen at dozens of similar events. The first 10 minutes played exactly as expected. Childhood photos of both of us, carefully selected to show happy, innocent kids who had no idea what their adult selves would be capable of. Early dating pictures where we actually looked in love, because we were, back when I thought honesty was a given rather than an aspiration. Family gatherings where everyone looked happy and normal, before I discovered that normal was just a performance some people were better at maintaining. Guests smiled and commented on our obvious compatibility, pointing out how we'd grown up together, how our families fit together, how natural we looked as a couple. The progression felt romantic, heartwarming, exactly what you'd expect from a professional presentation designed to celebrate true love. "You two are perfect together," I heard someone whisper from a nearby table. "Look how happy they've always been," added another voice. "Perfect together. Happy." Right. The photos continued chronologically through our relationship, building the narrative of a love story worth celebrating. College graduation pictures, family holidays, business events where all three of us worked together like the close-knit team everyone thought we were. Me and Justin at client meetings, Chloe capturing moments for other couples' perfect days, all of us smiling and professional and completely unaware that this story would end in public humiliation. Then the tone shifted. Recent photos appeared on screen, but these weren't the carefully curated memories from earlier in the key presentation. These came with timestamp overlays in stark white text, GPS coordinates displaying latitude and longitude with scientific precision, and metadata clearly visible in the corner, showing exactly when and where each image was captured. The room grew quieter as guests processed the technical details that seemed oddly specific for a romantic slideshow. Why would wedding photos need GPS coordinates? What was the significance of these particular timestamps? Then the final sequence began displaying, and every question was answered in graphic, undeniable clarity. The explicit images from my laptop filled the projection screen in high-resolution detail, each one more damning than the last. Chloe and Justin in my bedroom. On my sheets, using furniture I'd inherited from my grandmother. Timestamp overlays proved these were taken during the 3 months I was in Portland, helping my cousin plan her wedding, and being the kind of family member who shows up when people need support. The room fell completely silent. Not the comfortable quiet of guests watching romantic memories, but the horrified silence of people witnessing something they never expected to see at a wedding reception. Forks stopped halfway to mouths, wine glasses froze in midair, conversations died as every person in the reception hall processed what they were seeing. I watched Justin's face drain of color as the slideshow continued its relentless progression through the evidence I'd compiled. His mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish that had suddenly found itself out of water and gasping for survival. Beside him, Chloe's horrified gasp echoed across the reception hall, a sound of pure shock and recognition that confirmed what everyone was now seeing. Her face cycled through emotions like a broken television. Shock, horror, recognition, and finally the dawning realization that her secret was being broadcast to every important person in our professional and personal lives. "What the fuck?" someone whispered from the back of the hall. "Oh my God," came another voice, followed by the sound of someone's chair scraping against the floor as they shifted for a better view. The slideshow continued playing, each image more explicit than the last, while the timestamp overlays made it impossible for anyone to claim this was old footage or taken out of context. The GPS coordinates proved these photos were taken in my apartment, in my bedroom, during the exact time period when I was 3,000 miles away helping family. Justin bolted from the head table toward the audiovisual booth like his life depended on stopping the presentation, which it probably did. "Turn it off!" he shouted, his voice cracking with panic as he sprinted between tables of shocked guests. "Someone stop this thing!" But David was discovering what I'd counted on, that stopping one presentation immediately triggered the next queued file to auto-launch, as he frantically worked to stop the first. Slideshow. Backup files began launching in sequence, requiring him to locate and manually override each one while the automated system continued cycling through the presentations I'd loaded that morning. "I can't stop them all," David called back, his professional composure cracking as he realized the technical nightmare I'd created. "There are multiple files queued, and they're auto-advancing faster than I can locate them." Perfect. Exactly as planned. The reception hall erupted into chaos as guests began reacting to what they were witnessing. Some people stood up for better views. Others grabbed their phones to record the disaster, and a few had the decency to look away while the slideshow continued its devastating reveal. But not me. I remained seated at the head table, watching the chaos unfold with the calm satisfaction of someone who had planned every detail of this moment for weeks. The moment those explicit photos hit the screen, the reception hall exploded like someone had just announced the apocalypse during dessert service. Gasps echoed from every corner of the room, followed by the harsh scraping of chairs as guests twisted in their seats to get better views of my carefully curated revenge slideshow. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips, forks clattered onto plates, and conversations died so abruptly you could hear the projector's cooling fan humming in the background. "What the fuck?" someone whispered from the back, their voice carrying across the stunned silence. "Oh my God, is that—" Another voice started, then cut off as they realized exactly what they were seeing. Justin's face went through an impressive color progression from normal to pale to green, like a human mood ring calibrated for absolute terror. His mouth opened and closed without producing sound while his brain apparently short-circuited, trying to process the fact that his secret affair was now being broadcast in high definition to every important person in our professional and personal lives. And Chloe? Poor Chloe stood frozen in her Maid of Honor position, like someone had hit her personal pause button, her bouquet trembling in her hands as she watched herself having sex with my fiancé on a screen the size of a small building. Her face cycled through emotions faster than the slideshow changed images. Shock, horror, recognition, and finally the dawning realization that her secret was being displayed with professional-grade clarity to a room full of people with phones. But me? I remained perfectly calm at the head table, watching my masterpiece unfold with the satisfaction of someone who had planned every detail, every backup file, every possible contingency. 6 weeks of preparation were paying off beautifully. The timestamp overlays were working exactly as intended, displaying the dates and times in stark white text that made it impossible for anyone to claim these were old photos or taken out of context. GPS coordinates proved these images were captured. In my apartment, in my bedroom, during the exact 3 months I was in Portland helping family. "Turn it off!" Justin suddenly roared, his voice cracking as he bolted from the head table like his ass was on fire. He sprinted toward the audiovisual booth, shoving past shocked guests and knocking over someone's purse in his desperation to reach the controls. Too bad for him that I'd planned for exactly this scenario. David, our poor venue coordinator, was about to discover the beauty of my backup system as he frantically tried to stop the first presentation. But stopping one file immediately triggered the next queued presentation to auto-launch, exactly as I tested during our venue walkthrough. And the next one? And the next. "I can't stop them," David called back, his professional composure cracking as he realized the technical nightmare I'd created. "There are multiple files queued in sequence and they're auto-advancing faster than I can locate them manually." Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. The slideshow continued its relentless progression through the evidence I'd compiled, each image more damning than the last. Chloe bent over my grandmother's vanity. Justin using my shower. Both of them in my bed, on sheets I'd inherited from my aunt. The intimacy was undeniable, the betrayal complete, and the timing proven beyond any possible excuse. Guests started pulling out their phones because apparently nothing says memorable wedding moment, quite like recording your friend's public humiliation for social media posterity. I watched at least 6 people angle their screens to capture Chloe's horrified face while explicit photos of her affair played in the background. The irony was perfect. Mom grabbed my arm with enough force to leave bruises, her manicured nails digging into my skin as she leaned close to my ear. "Kayla, what is this?" she hissed, her voice tight with the kind of controlled panic that came from watching 22 years of professional reputation potentially evaporate in real time. "What the hell are you doing?" I turned to look at her calmly, noting how her face had gone completely white except for 2 spots of color high on her cheeks. "I'm showing our guests the truth about my relationship, Mom. Isn't that what wedding slideshows are for? Celebrating love stories?" Justin's father had apparently decided this was the time for damage control, hustling toward the projection screen like he could physically block the images with his body. Too bad the screen was mounted 8 feet off the ground and he was maybe 5'6" on a good day. But points for effort, I supposed. "Turn it off!" Justin screamed again, returning to our table with sweat beading on his forehead and his perfectly styled hair falling into his eyes. His charm had completely abandoned him, leaving behind the kind of raw panic that made him look about 10 years younger and infinitely less attractive. "Kayla, what the hell is wrong with you? You're humiliating everyone here, including your own family." I almost laughed at the accusation. I was humiliating people? That was rich coming from the man who'd been using my apartment as his personal brothel while I was helping family members plan their weddings. Am I, though? I asked, my voice carrying easily across the reception hall thanks to the professional sound system I'd tested so carefully. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I'm just sharing some family memories. Isn't that what you do at weddings? The slideshow had moved into its final sequence now, displaying the most explicit images with clinical precision. Timestamp overlays, GPS coordinates, metadata clearly visible in the corner, proving exactly when and where each photo was captured. No room for interpretation, no possibility of denial, no comfortable lies to smooth over the devastating truth. Chloe finally unfroze, stumbling toward our table on unsteady legs with tears streaming down her face. Her carefully applied makeup was creating abstract art down her cheeks, and her Maid of Honor bouquet had somehow ended up scattered across the floor behind her. "Kayla, please," she begged, her voice breaking on every word. "I'm begging you. It was a mistake. It meant nothing. Don't destroy our friendship over this." The audacity was truly impressive. Here she was, asking me not to destroy our friendship after she'd spent months destroying my relationship in my own bedroom. The woman who'd given a heartfelt speech about trust and loyalty 20 minutes ago was now pleading with me to ignore the evidence of her betrayal, while explicit photos of her affair continued cycling behind her. "Don't destroy our friendship?" I repeated, letting the words hang in the air while more guests whipped out their phones to capture this moment. "That's interesting timing for that request, Chloe." Several people were openly recording now, holding up their phones to capture the maid of honor begging the bride while explicit photos played in the background. The juxtaposition was perfect, exactly the kind of unforgettable moment that would be shared on social media for years to come. The slideshow completed its cycle and began again, because apparently my backup files were designed for maximum impact and minimum mercy. Fresh gasps echoed through the hall as guests who'd missed the first round got their chance to witness the full scope of the betrayal. I stood slowly, letting the movement draw every eye in the reception hall. My grandmother's dress rustled in the relative quiet as conversations halted and everyone strained to hear whatever I was about to say. The silence was so complete I could hear someone's stomach growling from 3 tables away. With deliberate precision, I removed my grandmother's ring, the same ring 3 generations of women in my family had worn to promise their lives to men who actually loved them, and placed it carefully on the table between my untouched wedding, cake and the flowers that were supposed to celebrate my happiness. The small click of metal against wood seemed to echo across the entire reception hall. "The only thing I destroyed," I said, my voice carrying clearly to every corner of the room, "was my own illusion about who you both really are." The reception hall stayed frozen for about 3 more seconds, like someone had pressed pause on a disaster movie, and then all hell broke loose. Guests erupted from their tables in a chaos of shocked voices and scraping chairs. Someone's aunt was crying into her napkin. 2 groomsmen were trying to physically block the screen with their jackets, and at least 6 people were recording everything on their phones because apparently my public humiliation needed to be preserved for social media posterity. Justin stood there looking like someone had just told him his entire life was canceled, which honestly wasn't that far from the truth. His mouth kept opening and closing without sound, and I swear I could actually see his brain short-circuiting as he processed the fact that his secret affair had just been broadcast in high definition to everyone who mattered in our professional and personal lives. But you know what? I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no anger, just this weird calm, like I'd finally stopped holding my breath after months of suffocating on lies. Mom grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. "We're leaving, now." I nodded and stood up slowly, letting my grandmother's ring stay there on the table between the untouched wedding cake and the flowers that were supposed to celebrate my happiness. 3 generations of women in my family had worn that ring to promise their lives to men who actually loved them, and I wasn't about to break that tradition now. David was still frantically trying to stop the slideshow, but my backup files kept launching exactly as I'd planned. The automated system I tested so carefully was working beautifully, cycling through the evidence on repeat while Justin's face went through an impressive color progression, from pale to green, to the kind of gray you see on people who are about to throw up. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mom announced in her professional crisis management voice, somehow maintaining her composure while her entire business reputation imploded in real time. "We apologize for this technical difficulty. The reception is now concluded." Technical difficulty. I almost smiled at that one. 3 years later, I'm sitting in the coffee shop on 5th Street, where my former best friend once asked to be my maid of honor, scrolling through social media updates about my old life like some kind of digital archaeologist excavating the ruins of my previous existence. The irony of the location isn't lost on me. This is where Chloe grabbed my hands across a sticky table and begged me to let her stand beside me on my wedding day, tears in her eyes as she talked about how much our friendship meant to her. Now I'm here alone with my laptop, reading secondhand information about how everyone's doing through mutual friends' posts because apparently I've become the kind of person other people avoid mentioning directly. Fair enough. I did nuke my entire social circle with the precision of a wedding planner who'd spent 6 weeks preparing for psychological warfare. According to Instagram stories from people who still follow both of us, Justin moved to Phoenix after our marriage was annulled. Turns out having explicit videos of your affair go viral during your wedding reception does interesting things to your marketing career. Who could have predicted that? His LinkedIn profile now lists him as seeking new opportunities, which is corporate speak for unemployable in this city, after my personal life became a cautionary tale. The marriage annulment was surprisingly straightforward once I provided evidence that our entire relationship was built on lies. Amazing how quickly the legal system moves when you have high-definition proof that your husband was fucking your best friend in your bedroom while you were planning your future together. Chloe lost 3 major photography clients when word spread about her behavior, because apparently the wedding industry talks, and reputation actually matters in a business built on trust and perfect moments. Shocking, right? But she eventually rebuilt her business in Sacramento because nothing says fresh start quite like moving 2 hours away from the scene of your spectacular personal destruction. The wedding industry really does talk, and damage control required the kind of intensive effort that Mom approached like a military campaign. She spent 3 months personally calling every vendor, every venue coordinator, every florist we'd worked with over the years, apologizing, explaining, managing the fallout from what she diplomatically called an unfortunate personal situation that occurred during a family event. The damage was severe. We lost 6 of our 10 major clients within the first month, because apparently having your daughter use professional equipment to publicly humiliate her cheating fiancé raises questions about business judgment and appropriate boundaries. Who knew? Despite Mom's decades-long reputation for integrity and excellence, we faced nearly 2 years of intensive reputation management. Every new client consultation included careful explanations about our commitment to professionalism. Every vendor meeting involved subtle reassurances that personal drama would never again interfere with business operations. Mom was initially devastated and angry, which I completely understood because I'd essentially used our family business as a weapon for personal revenge. She didn't speak to me for 3 weeks after the wedding, communicating only through terse text messages about immediate business necessities while I moved back into my old bedroom and tried to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do with my life now. I don't understand, she said during our first real conversation after the disaster. How could you jeopardize everything we've built together? Everything your father worked for? And honestly, I didn't have a good answer for that, because she was right. I had jeopardized everything. I'd used our professional reputation as collateral damage in my personal war against betrayal, and the cost was exactly what you'd expect when you prioritize revenge over business sense. But then something shifted. Maybe it was watching me pick up the pieces of our client base with the same methodical precision I'd used to plan the slideshow. Maybe it was seeing me work 18-hour days to rebuild relationships I damaged. Or maybe she just realized that staying angry wasn't going to fix anything. Your father would have been proud, she finally told me months later, after her anger had evolved into something more complicated. We were sitting in the office after a particularly difficult client meeting, both exhausted from explaining why our family drama wouldn't affect their perfect day. I looked up from the vendor contracts I was reviewing, surprised by the unexpected statement. Proud of me destroying our business reputation? Proud of you choosing principle over security, she said quietly. He left his corporate career to start this business with nothing but integrity and hope. He always said that living authentically matters more than living comfortably, even when the cost feels unbearable. That conversation hit me like a truck because it made me realize something I'd been too angry and hurt to see clearly. My desperate need for stability after Dad's death had nearly trapped me in a relationship built on lies. I'd been so terrified of losing the security I'd found with Justin that I'd ignored red flags, rationalized suspicious behavior, and convinced myself that comfortable deception was better than difficult truth. Choosing to expose the lies instead of living with them was exactly what Dad would have wanted. He'd built our business on the principle that authentic moments matter more than perfect appearances, that real love deserves real honesty, and that some things are worth fighting for even when the cost seems unbearable. I kept my grandmother's ring, but I had it reset into a necklace that I wear daily now as a reminder that some betrayals teach necessary lessons about choosing self-worth over false security. The ring looks different as a pendant, more like a promise I made to myself than a symbol of someone else's commitment to me. Our family business has slowly recovered, though it took nearly 3 years to fully rebuild our client base. Word-of-mouth referrals started trickling back in as we proved that personal drama wouldn't interfere with professional excellence. Vendors who'd worked with us for years began recommending us again. Venues that had quietly distanced themselves started returning our calls. Turns out there's something to be said for a business that values authentic moments over comfortable lies, even when the authenticity comes at a significant cost. I'm dating again now, which feels weird to admit after everything that happened. His name is David. He's a quiet accountant who has never met my family or seen my workplace, someone whose life doesn't intertwine with mine in ways that could facilitate deception. We met at a bookstore, of all places, because apparently my life needed the kind of ordinary meet-cute that doesn't involve professional networking or family connections. We're taking things slowly, building trust incrementally rather than assuming it exists. No shared apartment keys, no unquestioned access to personal spaces, no assumptions about loyalty based on proximity and convenience. It's a different kind of relationship than what I had with Justin, more deliberate and less desperate. The slideshow USB drive sits in my desk drawer next to thank you notes from recent clients, a strange juxtaposition that pretty much sums up my life these days. I keep it not as a memento of revenge, but as proof that I chose my own dignity over maintaining comfortable lies. Some evidence is worth preserving, not for the satisfaction of what it destroyed, but for the reminder of what it protected. Sometimes the most important wedding you plan is the one that never should have happened.